All right. I suppose if you're an HVAC engineer, you know a lot about delta T's and air contaminant concentrations and so on, but you might not know a whole lot about paleoclimatology, and I don't know a lot about any of that either, but I do know we're living in an ice age, and for the last 3 million years, the planet has gone through many cycles of warming and cooling, glacial and interglacial periods. And if we look at the graph, it's hard to say whether CO2 or temperature comes first, but the two are largely parallel. So CO2 concentrations seem to have a Goldilocks level in about that 250 to 300 range, and of course the alarm sounds off with the current levels. So it's also interesting that in the past 4 interglacial periods, peak temperatures are higher than we've seen in this current one of the past 12 to 15,000 years. So let's look at 125,000 years ago. So if you have ever glanced at a globe, you'll see that Greenland is completely covered by ice, and that's up to 3 kilometers thick. 125,000 years ago, as the planet warmed over the span of a few thousand years, sea levels rose above current levels by over 14 feet. Of course, this, amongst others, is a risk that science points to with CO2 emissions, and in fact, these sea levels and global temperatures from the last warming might happen regardless of CO2 concentration. So as designers and economists, and we measure and manage risks as part of our daily work, and how do we go about engineering the planet to be not too hot and not too cold, but just right? So we'll be taking a closer look as we go with this trends for 2021, but for now, I can just share a few pieces of really great news. First, 2/3 of our energy consumption can come from clean and renewable sources at competitive prices to fossil fuel. And here we show our energy pie dividing 2/3 into buildings and industry. Second, these global supplies dwarf our current consumption of energy. You can see the big sun versus the little purple sun is what we currently consume. North American supplies, especially such as solar, are particularly abundant where we live. Installations such as wind power plants are doubling and redoubling to where current sources are more than 8% of U.S. capacity. So if you saw a month or two ago our mass timber, we tried to get a measure of global use and energy improvements, and we shared this projection for global energy supplies from 2005 that shows fossil fuel consumption dropping rapidly as renewable sources for electricity energy ramp up. But at right, I penciled in a scenario for North America projecting to 2030 and 2050. Efficiency improvements will continue to reduce consumption from over 100 quads in the year 2000 to 80 quads in 2050. Solar sources continue to grow, become the largest source. Coal phases out completely by 2030. Gas stays in the picture as a good source of variable electricity that phases out as a heating fuel. Nuclear, if we go out on a limb, could make a comeback in a fail-safe form. Oil remains the most efficient source of high-density transportation fuel, but these transportation emissions are offset by forest growth and carbon capture. And finally, biomass makes a resurgence past those pre-industrial levels due to integrated forest and waste management. So as we get into buildings, we see the interrelationships of savings and consumption. The business as usual growth in building energy tracks steadily up over the 40 quad level in the 20 years from 2010 to 2030. For countering that rise is increased efficiency across a broad range of building design elements. So the outcome is that buildings will consume 50% less energy in the 20 quad range, and equal to the savings we were looking for on the previous slide. So while we can help put construction cost numbers against these things, the real heroes are the engineering wizards who create this new built environment.